Okay, we learned about control statements, which allows us to make different decisions if a condition is true or it is not. Now we're going to learn about iteration, which is the ability to repeat a task multiple times. Now, an overview of iteration is that you can perform something either up to an infinite amount of times or a set number of times so that you can A, reuse code and save time and energy. The most important type of iteration, and probably my favorite type of iterative example, is the commonly used for loop. Now, the for loop allows you to, again, run a certain amount of code or a certain block of code inside your curly braces a certain number of times. Now, here is our example of the for loop, and our for loop is probably going to be the most complicated keyword because of all the parameters it takes or all the setup it requires to properly be carried out in Java. So above here, I have a pseudo example of a for loop. For a for loop, we use the keyword for, and then we have three conditions the for loop must have. And it must be separated by semicolons. So we have initialization, then a semicolon, then the termination condition, which is when the loop should end. So how many times should we be doing this loop? And then the update statement, which updates the condition to a new state. So then the termination condition, the second parameter, can check if it's true. And then within the curly braces after that declaration of the for loop, we have our code to execute. Here is a real life example down below. I have a for loop, and then within our first part of the code, in our initialization, we have int I equals 0. So I'm initializing a variable here. It is important to initialize a variable so that we have one to track during the loop. My second part of the for loop is the termination condition, which is just a Boolean statement. So when this condition is not true, the loop will no longer execute. I will no longer be iterating through this block of code. In this case, my termination condition is I is less than 10. Now note that I starts out at 0. Then my update statement. So the update statement is run after each iteration of the loop. After each block of code runs, the update statement gets run. So let me show you a walkthrough of what's going to happen here. My code is going to get run. I'm in the main method. That automatically gets run by Java, as we know. Then it hits the for loop. It creates a variable named I and sets it to 0. Then my code gets run. It prints out iteration number. I is set to 0, so this will print out iteration plus 0. Then I will hit this back brace. So then I will go back up to the for loop. When I hit the end of the for loop, the update statement gets carried out. So now I is set to 1. After the update statement, the termination condition is checked for the first time. Actually, it's checked for the second time. It was checked initially when I entered the loop. So is I less than 10? Well, I is 1. So 1 is less than 10. That's true. So go a second time. System print out iteration number. Then it prints out iteration number 1 because now I is 1. Then it hits this back brace, and the update statement gets called again, I++, which again, as we know, increments I to now 2, from 1 to 2. Then our termination condition gets called. Is I less than 10? Is 2 less than 10? Well, that's still true, so then go through it again. Print out iteration 2, and we do this all the way to 9. Now on the last iteration, I have the printout above here, as you can see. Then when the iteration is 9, it prints out iteration number 9, goes here, the update statement gets called. So now it goes from 9 to 10. It then asks, is I less than 10? Is 10 less than 10? No, 10 is not less than 10. 10 is equal to 10. So because the condition, the termination condition reports false, the for loop is done and the code exits because the termination condition was now false.